When people talk about Monster Hunter Wilds, they usually talk about the monsters or the story or the crazy gear. And while those deserve the praise that they get, I think the environment design is something often overlooked. But even more than that, the incredible design that I feel like makes the Windward Plains special. While across the board, Monster Hunter has a fantastic set of environments, from Monster Hunter World's ancient forest to the Windward Plains in Monster Hunter Wilds, and even going back into older generations. But I feel like the Windward Plains stands alone at the top. So as a 3D environment artist, I can't help but look at areas like this differently. Every cliff, every landmark, every path through the landscape had to be intentionally designed by someone like me. So today, I want to break down the Windward Plains from that perspective and look at why I think it's one of the strongest opening regions Capcom has ever built. The moment you step into the Windward Plains, your eye is immediately drawn towards the massive disc-shaped mountain dominating the horizon. Before you've taken a single step forward, the artists have already established a visual anchor for the entire region. Good environment design isn't about making every location equally interesting. It's about controlling where the player looks. The giant mountain towers above everything else, giving the player an immediate point of reference that draws their eye and allows them to orient no matter where they travel in the region. The rest of the landscape supports that composition. The winding river naturally guides your eye through the open grasslands, while the surrounding cliffs frame the environment without completely closing it off. The plains feel massive because the artist leaves so much uninterrupted space between landmarks, allowing for the true scale of the environment to breathe. As you begin exploring, the environment slowly reveals itself rather than showing everything at once. The towering rock formations to the east seem to form a natural barrier, but as you realize you can move through the natural corridors that they've created, you eventually stumble on Kunafa Village. Instead of placing the settlement directly in view, the artists are using the terrain to give the village a unique look. But even more than that, they're doing it to place the village in reality. Because ultimately, the people of Kunafa can't fight the monsters that exist in the region. For these people to even last, they would have to hide. So naturally, the village would be built in some secluded area, and that works perfectly with where we see the village actually placed, in this secluded gap in the cliffs. So while even though the game will tell you this while you're playing through it, it's still a crucial detail to get right to make the world feel real. In and around Kunafa also introduces one of my favorite details of the region, Volgarite. These vibrant blue crystal formations immediately stand out against the warm sandstone surrounding them, creating a striking contrast that naturally draws your attention. At first you see it in the side of rocks, and then in the village as it's used as decoration, but more importantly, it's used as a defense mechanism, because as the wind blows, the crystals chime together and mimic the sounds of rain down. Beyond the village, the cliffs give way to an endless sea of dune. Nestled in these dunes is a small oasis that almost welcomes you to relax. But yet as you move closer to the mountain and you walk under these massive spires that almost seem to form a ribcage of sorts, only to push further and eventually arrive at a massive crater where the ground is blanketed in Volgarite, pulsating with electricity. It feels as though you've reached the beating heart of the region, but it's then that you begin to realize that the aforementioned Ray Dao almost certainly resides here. And for a creature to be able to withstand the immense surges of energy that they would have to deal with here, they must be incredibly powerful. The player feels all this without a word being spoken, without a monster being shown, without a sign being read, because every major landmark feels connected through composition, material language, and visual storytelling. Rather than feeling like disconnected biomes stitched together, the Windward Plains feels like one continuous landscape, shaped by the same geological forces. One of the most impressive aspects of the Windward Plains isn't necessarily just the layout, but it's how the same layout will transform to something completely new during the seasonal cycle. During the plenty, warm light, lush vegetation, and roaming wildlife makes the plains feel welcoming, and the landscape appears healthy and alive. But then comes the follow-up. The terrain itself hasn't changed, but suddenly the region feels harsher. The vegetation thins out, the water recedes, wildlife becomes scarce, and the colors begin to shift towards dry earth tones. The exact same composition now communicates scarcity instead of abundance. Finally, the sand tide transforms the environment once again. Dust fills the air, visibility decreases, lightning cuts across the skyline, and the Volgarite crystals that were once simply points of visual interest suddenly become active elements within the environment. And what I love most is that Capcom isn't changing the geometry here, they're just changing the atmosphere. All the lighting, the weather effects, the materials, and the color grading is all external pieces. The actual core environment is still the same, but it feels like something completely different. And while all the regions in this game are affected to a similar degree in these different seasons, I feel like the Windward Plains describes it best. And it is a perfect example of how environment art isn't just about building the assets, it's about creating it. One of the easiest mistakes to make in an open environment is making it either too confusing or too predictable. And yet the Windward Plains avoids both. Notice how the environment opens into large vistas before narrowing into these more focused pathways. Wide open grasslands slowly shift into rocky corridors that kind of compress the player's movement, before they yet again open back up into a larger space. This constant rhythm between openness and enclosure keeps the exploration engaging, while quietly directing the player without relying on artificial barriers. Players rarely need to rely on a mini-map because the world itself communicates where they are. As environment artists, we spend a lot of time thinking about readability, and the Windward Plains is a fantastic example of it. The player is often given enough visual information to navigate naturally without feeling like they're being led. Good level design tells you where to go. Great environment design makes you want to go there. Something I really appreciate about this environment wasn't that it was designed first, with monsters just thrown in. The environment and its inhabitants clearly informed each other throughout development. The open plains provide room for ceratothon threats to move naturally across the landscape. Dashiguma, though, use that same openness to hunt in packs, reinforcing the relationship between predator and prey. Further into the dunes, Balahara's ability to burrow through the sand makes perfect sense, because the entire environment was designed to support that behavior. And then there's Raid Down. Everything from the towering cliffs to the fulgurite formations and violent sand-tide storms builds anticipation for its arrival. Even before you encounter it, the environment has already begun telling you that something powerful rules this region. And that's environment storytelling at its strongest. Instead of explaining the ecosystem through dialogue, the artists are communicating it all through terrain, landmarks, weather, and creature behavior. Some of the best environment art is the work you never consciously see. It's the gradual reduction of vegetation as you approach the mountain. It's the repeated sandstone colors that tie distant landmarks together. It's the erosion patterns carved into the cliffs. It's the way the blue fulgurite becomes a recurring visual motif across multiple locations. It's the atmospheric perspective that makes distant landmarks feel enormous. It's the careful use of negative space that makes the plains feel expansive without filling every single corner with points of interest. Individually, none of these demand attention, but collectively, they're what convince your brain that this place could actually exist. And that's the magic of environment art. When it's well done, players don't notice the design, they simply believe the world. The Windward Plains succeeds because every artistic decision supports the same goal. It's the composition that guides the player naturally. It's the landmarks that create memorable silhouettes. It's the materials and color palette that establish a cohesive visual language. The seasons that demonstrate how atmosphere can redefine a familiar space without rebuilding it. And it's the monsters that feel like they evolved alongside the environment instead of just being dropped into it. As a player, it's easy to remember the hunts, but as an environment artist, I remember the space between them, because those spaces aren't empty. They're carefully composed and thoughtfully constructed, and filled with countless artistic decisions that quietly shaped every moment of the player's experience. And to me, that's what great environment design looks like. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video. My name's been Pengu, and y'all have a great rest of your day. See ya.